Tamara Lich and Chris Barber have been found guilty of mischief. Chris Barber has additionally been found guilty of counseling, I believe it was counseling, to disobey a court order for the interlocutory injunction issued against the Freedom Convoy for honking on February 7th, and then continued a short time later by Justice McLean of the Ontario Superior Court. There should have been no conviction here. There shouldn't have ever been a conviction. We should have never gotten to the point in this country where the Freedom Convoy was necessary. But guess what? It was, because where were we at that time? We're in a place where people had to choose between taking an experimental procedure and their job. And that's not a choice. That's not informed consent. That's coercion. That's not okay. That's not in line with fundamental freedoms and respect of bodily autonomy. That is an egregious violation of those things. And it was not justified. So the Freedom Convoy is what happened as a result of it. And unfortunately, Tamara Lich and Chris Barber today, Canadian heroes through and through the whole time, but they've borne a huge sacrifice today. And I can't be more thankful to know these people, to have gone to Freedom Convoy as under my own free will, to do that, stand up for what's right, as all Canadians at that time who were awake to it did. And I believe truly one day history will look back at that time with amazing, look back on it properly with the respect it deserves. And guys, before I continue, covering this trial has taken in an enormous amount of energy and effort. It's been over 40 days in the court there. I was there for the vast majority of that, and in the days I wasn't there, I was doing summaries anyways. So if you have any additional money that money's tight, but if you want to support the hard work that I am doing, send an Interact e-transfer to realrightblend@gmail.com. That is realrightblend@gmail.com. It helps a lot because a lot of time spent here, a lot of gas. If you were following me on X today, you saw my coverage from the courtroom, which had a lot of the details from what happened. And 5 out of 6 charges. Tamara beat 5 of the 6 charges against her, being found guilty only of the mischief, and Chris Barber beat 5 of the 7 against him, being found guilty of the mischief and the counseling disobey court order, one of the two. It's crazy. And when you look at the other charges, you look at the intimidation, which they were not found guilty of. When the judge explained the reason for not finding them guilty of that, she said, I felt like I'm having a deja vu moment here when I'm going through the evidence. The Crown's arguments for this charge are the same as the mischief, and intimidation is not the same. It becomes duplicity. That's not what this is. Intimidation has very set parameters. There has to be a menacing, there has to be violence, and she said there was no menacing or violence in Freedom Convoy, which is huge, and we've heard that time and time again. She quoted the decision of His Majesty the King versus Pat King, where in that decision Justice Hackman said that the Freedom Convoy was not there to intimidate people, and that the government of Canada is not a person for the sake of being intimidated under the criminal code. Right? Their goal of the Freedom Convoy was a legal goal, to advocate for ending of the mandates. Like, that's my opinion. I don't know exactly. I believe it was said that the express purpose of the convoy itself to end mandates or advocate for the end of mandates is not illegal. We have a right to do that. That was our redress. People tried calling MPPs. People tried calling MLAs. People tried talking to MPs. They were laughed at. They were told to go away. They got the cops called on them. People and kids skating on hockey rinks were tackled to the ground. This was a dark time in our history, and thank the Lord that the Freedom Convoy rolled through the dark and came to Ottawa, and by the grace of God was peaceful. And we've had that affirmed in the fact that there was no violence, no menacing, like the criminal code for intimidation, being set upon, besetting somebody, watching, whatever. There's a menacing, there's a violence. Didn't happen. And then same with the obstruct charges. Obstruct police, very specific circumstances. Chris and Tamara hold the line. That's what the Crown's case was predicated on, aiding as a principal or party or an aider or abettor to any of the offenses or counseling thereof for any of the offenses. And then you might ask, if you read my summary of the charges and the convictions, what does counseling not committed mean? Basically, not committed is the Crown's going to say somebody said something, and the thing that they said had an unreasonable risk, as the law would call it, of someone else hearing that and acting upon it to commit a crime. You're basically inciting them to do that, and you're going to be held responsible for it, whether as if you did it yourself. And the not committed part is the Crown doesn't have to say, this person, Tommy, heard these words and did that. Not committed means you're still going to be held accountable as if someone did it, but we can't find anyone specifically to say they did those things. Okay, that's what that is. And it's in the criminal code, they could do that. It was thorough. The judge spoke extensively about the case law. I mentioned Pulaski in Alberta, how the judge over there found him the mischief defense, the statutory mischief defense, that if you go to have a communicative purpose something that would be for the purpose of communication that would otherwise be a mischief, you could be defended from it. In fact, Mr. Greenspan, who is a lawyer for Tamara Lich, argued that in the front of the Court of Appeal for Ontario in R.V. Trombley 2010, I believe, where the statutory defense for mischief in the code, the criminal code, actually came to be litigated there and to be understood to protect messages that would otherwise be mischievous for the purpose of communication. Now, the judge ultimately disagreed with the defense's position for the statutory defense of mischief, finding the accused guilty of mischief, but they were not guilty of the counseling mischief. And I kind of skipped the justification for that, but from what it sounded like, the Crown requested that counseling charge for counseling others committed mischief not committed would be stayed on the condition that the people were found guilty. The accused, Chris and Tamara, were found guilty of the substantive charge of actual mischief. So in that case, that's why I think that was count 1 was stayed. The other charges were the other 4 charges were beaten. That would be the intimidation and the counseling intimidation, and then the obstruct police. And it might have been counseling obstruct police. I don't recall at this time. It's just a lot of information. This has been tremendous. And stay tuned, because I'm about to show you an interview with Eva Chipiak, lawyer, and also with Tom Marazzo, who is heavily involved in Freedom Convoy. He speaks to kind of the social issues going on with this case. So what did you think of that trial? I mean, the conviction today, not the greatest news in the world, but what are your thoughts?
I'm going to turn it to Tom first.
All right, Tom, what are your thoughts?
I lost the coin toss. I think my thoughts on this are that that it's just one more example in the courts where the public is held to an exceptionally high standard and the government is held to no standard. And we've yet to see one single conviction or one politician being brought before the court for anything. As far as I'm concerned, the convoy was a manifestation of what the government caused. And there was no mention today at all on the 2 years of harm that the government of Canada caused for the public to motivate Canadians to travel from east and west, north and south, come to Ottawa to protest these mandates. I mean, the suicide rate in Toronto was up 40% in the first year. There was protests for 2 years before the convoy, and not one politician ever met with any of the protesters across Canada. Yet it went throughout the entire country. And so the convoy was sort of a manifestation of all of that combined, and yet the public are the ones held to the high standard. I mean, they only had a conviction on mischief. Like, that's a throwaway charge.
I was surprised, actually, that Tamara was convicted, because my thinking was that if the Carter application had failed, based on the actual direct evidence presented about Ms. Lich, which is, I think, like maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 things, a couple of videos, and everything else is the hearsay exception with Chris Barber. I thought that if the Carter was defeated, that for sure she'd walk away. We're just kind of getting a little bit close here.
No, because we can't hear.
So
Go ahead.
I'm surprised that there was a conviction on that avenue. I thought if there was going to be a conviction for Tamara, that it was going to be through the Carter. So that was very surprising. But you're right. We haven't seen any kind of accountability from anyone. And we heard today of the harms that were done to the people of Ottawa from horns, honking, fumes, idling, but we didn't hear of the harms done to people who had to do this and take this medical procedure or lose their job, the businesses destroyed, the families torn apart. It was insane, and there's been no accountability at all. So it's one way. That's not justice.
Yeah, well, what I'll just add is not really commenting on the criminal charges themselves, but I think it is time for Canadians to hold the government to account, and I'd like for Canadians to remind our government officials and public servants that they are here to serve the public and not their own self-interest or the systems, because what I'm seeing is that the public seems to come last, and I think that that's wrong.
Right, and it wasn't like the convoy appeared out of nowhere, like Tom said. There was years of protests, years of petitioning MLAs and MPPs and MPs, and everyone just kind of laughed it off.
Yeah.
So what other redress was there? It's shameful that it came to that, but God bless Tamara and Chris for doing it, and everybody else for going there, but the grace of God being peaceful. Like, truly, we heard from Justice Perkins McVeigh today that no menacing, no violence. We heard that in Packland's decision in the King case. So this is great. Like that's a good affirmation of the fact that there was no violence. It's not this cartoonish terrorization that we heard some pundits play, right? It was some horns honking and fumes idling. But when you look at the damages that got us to that point, ignoring citizens for years, what they just want us to sit down and take it. It's not okay, man. Like there's got to be a redress here. I mean, Tom, what would you, in an ideal world, what do you think should have happened?
In an ideal world, the first day the convoy arrived, the Prime Minister shouldn't have gone into hiding, and he actually should have come and talked to the protesters. We made the offers several times.
Yeah, I want to just add, in an ideal world, public representatives, official representatives should be representing the public, and they're not. So that's an ideal world, is our public servants serving the public, and they're not.
And this is incredible because this is a huge issue. It's affected millions of people. Lives were ruined irreparably. This is not a small detail. This is not some sort of a tax issue where people didn't get a benefit. This is you take this medical procedure or you lose your life in your life, and you have no recourse. This is huge, and it needs to be addressed at some point in time. Hasn't been yet, but again, thanks to you guys too, because you've been on this. Tamara Lich, you were speaking, being a voice of reason during that time, reaching out to officials desperately, right? Trying to get anybody to come be reasonable and in the most practical way, and you served the country, thanks for that. And you brought all your experience to the table, you did it perfect, couldn't have gone any better. And you as well, Eva, were here.
Well, it could have gone any better if our elected officials
right, on your end,
servants were doing their job.
And if we could elect some of those officials, which we can't, that's one of the big problems.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you guys because I know you're in from out of town, but thank you for your time, Tom. Thanks for everything.
Thanks for covering it.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for everything you do.
Eva Chipiak, Tamara Lich, great people. There should have been a conviction, but in the realm of what was likely to happen here, this is honestly the best possible outcome in many ways. Now, mind you, I've spoken extensively with you about this, that if the Carter application, which is an exception to the hearsay rule, if that was denied, my thinking was that Tamara Lich would walk away. Now, when the judge this morning said that she's dismissing the Carter, her decision's 105 pages long. She didn't read the whole thing. She skipped a lot of it. And she is very into the weeds of the legal reasonings. It's a very thought out decision. A lot of stuff there. But when she said this morning that the Carter was dismissed, I'm thinking Tamara's walking away. But then when she finds Tamara guilty of mischief, I have to admit, that was probably one of the least likely scenarios I imagined based on the things as I was hearing them. Because the evidence that the Crown presented, as we heard, they were summarized today. We heard from the civilian witnesses who testified about fumes, about horns, about how they couldn't sleep. And by the way, what about the people who couldn't have a job, couldn't talk to their family, couldn't go visit their loved ones in the homes? What about those people? Like, what about everything? When is there going to be you'll see it in my interview with Morazzo and Ms. Chipiak, but when are those people going to be, when are we going to get justice? When are we going to get accountability? It's ridiculous, guys, but best of a bad situation, and thank God for Chris and Tamara. Thank God for the Freedom Convoy. Thank God. I think the sentencing, there's a wide range of possibilities. We could look at something like Jason Vandermeer. Guy had the shed truck right at the front of Wellington and Metcalfe, found guilty of mischief. I believe his sentence was 90 days, 45 days house arrest, 45 days curfew. Then we have obviously Pat King, found guilty of multiple charges. His sentence was 1 year jail, 9 months credit for penitentiary time, plus 3 months house arrest, which he's currently serving. Then we have the case out west of Marco Van Hugenbos, who was found guilty of mischief and did 3 months in jail. And so we have a wide range of possibilities here. Tamara has some jail credit. I don't remember exactly how much. I think it would be at least 2 months, maybe more. 50-something days? Yeah. So there's some time there. Chris, on the other hand, Chris Barber, who was found guilty of 2 charges, and Tamara was found guilty of just mischief, has done no time in jail. But there could be anything from an absolute discharge, which is not going to happen, we'll say, up to, community service, to house arrest, to penitentiary time. There's a wide array of possibilities here. I think, if I had to put money on it, I think the worst case we're looking at is probably house arrest. I don't want to speculate, guys. It's just reckless. It doesn't serve a purpose. It's not conducive to anything. The legal reasonings are crazy. There's an extensive witness summaries, right? We heard about the rare person who did have contact with Chris or Tamara. Chris, in their case, I think was the only one. I don't think anyone had contact with Tamara except for the arresting officer when they arrested her. He was always, usually, a couple times getting frustrated, but advocating for peace, working in the good faith agreement to move the truck, shrink the footprint of the protest back down. And there was evidence that he was working in good faith on that, but at the same time, the judge said, he was aware that there was an impact. He was aware of that court order. That's why she found that the actus reus and the mens rea of the offense were made out for the disobey court order. So she found him guilty of that. When the evidence for that charge that the Crown tendered was a video that Chris posted to TikTok where he said, if the riot police come at you in a big group, get in your truck, lock the truck, and get on the horn and some expletives, and don't let go, and so on and forth, as some sort of an alarm. And the defense, I guess, tried to argue that there's an exception in Justice McLean's decision, the interlocutory injunction against the warrant sought by the citizens of Ottawa. And by the way, that's a selective group of citizens. Are we still at one time? That's a selective group of citizens. That order makes an exception for an emergency, but the judge didn't agree that police coming to arrest or deal with people is an emergency. So found guilty of that. Having awareness of that order and doing that is enough to make out the offense and to be found guilty of it. The mischief, again, the statutory defense did not hold. The Lawrence Griezmann did amazing on that. Eric Granger did amazing on that. Again, they litigated R.V. Tremblay and the Court of Appeal for Ontario, so they're experts on this. They did a great job. Mischief standard seems to be on the floor almost. The witnesses, the people confusing the fumes, the horns, the things they saw, the interference of their business. Just look at what happened to our entire country during that time. What about everything else? What about the interference to our lives? What about these unfair mandates, these subjugations of second-class citizenry that was created, the segregation? It wasn't right. It was wrong, and it'll always be wrong. This has been the experience of a lifetime to cover this. Thank you guys for following every single day. It's been long, it's been very difficult, but my God, would I ever do it again? Chris and Tamara, they're fantastic people. I've sat through quite a number of these Convoy trial now, and the theme I get is that people love this country, and we've got a lot of strength and love in this country, and we can really make something great here, and I really hope that we can turn the ship around and make something better. Thank you guys for watching.